Can you explain one of those times?
Well, the most vivid one, if you've heard.
They told the families it was quick. They told the historians it was confirmed. They told the world the case was closed. But what if everything we were told about this submarine was wrong? Because if you stand on the quiet shoreline of New Jersey at night, staring into the black Atlantic, you are looking at the final resting place of a German war machine that was never supposed to be there. A submarine officially declared sunk near Gibraltar, lying silently just miles from the American coast. And that single contradiction is where the story truly begins. Before we go any further, take a second, subscribe to the channel, and leave a like. Stories like this disappear into obscurity far too often, and every interaction helps keep these forgotten truths alive. Now listen carefully. During the final months of World War II, as the Third Reich was collapsing under relentless Allied pressure, German command continued sending submarines into the Atlantic. These were not routine patrols anymore. These were desperate missions, launched into a war already lost. One of those submarines was U-869. Official records claimed it left port in late 1944, bound for the waters near Gibraltar. Its task was simple on paper: intercept Allied shipping moving through the Mediterranean gateway. A dangerous mission, but not unusual. What was unusual was where the submarine ended up. According to Allied reports, on February 11, 1945, 2 American naval vessels detected and destroyed a German U-boat near Gibraltar. No survivors, no wreckage recovered, no reason to doubt the report. So U-869 was marked as destroyed. 56 men officially dead. Case closed. Except, the ocean doesn't care about paperwork. For decades, something sat quietly on the seafloor off New Jersey. Fishermen snagged their nets on it. Sonar picked up a long, unnatural shape, then lost it again in the noise. No one paid attention. After all, there were no submarines supposed to be there. Until 1991, a small group of deep wreck divers, not military, not funded, not officially sanctioned, were scanning the seabed roughly 60 miles offshore. What they found was impossible. At 230 feet below the surface, resting in darkness and silt, lay a submarine. Not broken into pieces, not scattered, almost intact. And from the moment they descended, one thing became clear. This wreck did not belong here. The submarine's hull was massive, far larger than coastal defense boats. Fishing nets wrapped around the conning tower like spiderwebs. The metal skin was warped and torn, as if crushed by an invisible hand. No name, no markings, no obvious cause of death, just silence. Divers would later say the wreck felt wrong. Not in a supernatural way, but in the sense that it didn't match any known records. No German submarine was ever reported lost in these waters. Yet here it was. The team gave it a nickname, the U-Who, because nobody knew what it was, and nobody knew how it got there. Every dive was a gamble. At that depth, a single mistake could be fatal. Bottom time was measured in minutes. Decompression took hours. Visibility was so poor that divers often had to feel their way along the hull. But curiosity is a powerful thing. Inside the wreck, they began finding clues. German gauges, metric markings, naval insignia corroded but unmistakable. This was a German U-boat. The question was, which one? The breakthrough didn't come from a torpedo tube or a control panel. It came from something small, a knife. Buried in silt, covered in decades of corrosion, a simple butter knife was pulled from the wreck, and scratched into the metal was a single name, Hornberg. That name would unravel everything, because Hornberg wasn't a ship. It wasn't a model. It was a man. And according to German naval records, A man named Georg Hornberg served on only one submarine that disappeared without a trace, U-869. Suddenly, the impossible became undeniable. The submarine officially sunk near Gibraltar, had been sitting off the coast of New Jersey for nearly 50 years, which meant one thing. The official story was false. And if the location was wrong, what else was wrong? Why was U-869 near America at all? Why were its torpedo tubes still sealed? Why did the damage look internal, as if the explosion came from within? And most disturbing of all, what was the submarine actually carrying? Because when divers began accessing previously sealed compartments decades later, they would find items that were never meant to be there. Intelligence materials, propaganda, and symbols that suggested a mission far darker than a routine patrol. A mission that, if successful, might have changed the war's final chapter on American soil. And the deeper investigators looked, the more it seemed that someone, somewhere, had made sure this story stayed buried, underwater, in silence. The moment U-869 was identified, the story should have ended. Instead, it became far more dangerous, because proving what the submarine was only exposed a much larger problem, why it was there. German naval doctrine was precise, even obsessive. Submarines did not wander randomly across the Atlantic in 1945. Fuel was scarce. Crews were exhausted. The war was collapsing. Every mission mattered. And yet U-869 had crossed an ocean it had no reason to cross. Researchers began reconstructing its final weeks, using fragments, radio logs, partial transmissions, Allied patrol reports, and survivor testimony from men who never sailed on it, but almost did. The last confirmed German radio transmission from U-869 placed it deep in the North Atlantic, nowhere near Gibraltar. After that, silence. No mayday, no distress call, no combat report, just a ghost signal, and nothing else. This detail alone shattered the official narrative. If the submarine was destroyed near Gibraltar, why did it never report arriving in the area? Why did it vanish thousands of miles earlier? One explanation began circulating quietly among historians. U-869 never went to Gibraltar. It was rerouted. Late-war Germany was obsessed with unconventional warfare. As Allied forces closed in, command structures fractured. Orders were rerouted through intelligence channels instead of traditional naval command. Some missions were never written down. Others were deliberately erased, and that raised an unsettling possibility. What if U-869's real mission was never meant to survive the war? As divers continued returning to the wreck, they noticed something deeply unsettling. There were no signs of panic, no opened hatches, no emergency ascent attempts, no scattered equipment. Crew remains were found at their stations, as if whatever happened, happened instantly. This ruled out one scenario immediately. The submarine did not slowly flood. It was destroyed in seconds. That left two main theories. The first was terrifyingly simple: a circle runner torpedo. German torpedoes were advanced, but notoriously unreliable. A malfunctioning guidance system could cause a fired torpedo to curve, slowly, silently, until it completed a full circle and slammed back into the submarine that launched it. Veteran U-boat captains feared this more than enemy depth charges. If U-869 fired even a single test shot, if one gyro failed, the crew would have had no time. Supporters of this theory point to internal blast patterns. Metal bent outward, compartments crushed from the inside, evidence consistent with a detonation extremely close to the hull. But there was a problem. Why would U-869 fire a torpedo at all? No Allied ships reported being attacked. No convoy logs mentioned near misses. And the torpedo tubes, astonishingly, were still sealed. Which leads to the second theory, and this one implicates the United States Navy. On February 11, 1945, two American vessels reported detecting and attacking a German submarine in the Atlantic. Depth charges were deployed. Explosions followed. The crew reported oil surfacing, a classic sign of a successful kill. The Navy credited the sinking. For decades, this engagement was retroactively assigned to U-869. But when divers compared coordinates, the math didn't work. The reported attack site and the wreck location were close, but not close enough. And depth charges leave a signature. They rupture hulls from the outside in. But U-869 looked like it had been crushed from within. This contradiction haunted investigators. If the Americans didn't sink it, and it didn't destroy itself, then what did? The answer may lie in what the submarine was carrying. For years, one compartment remained inaccessible. Corrosion and structural collapse sealed it like a tomb. Attempts to breach it risked killing the divers. But technology evolves, and in the mid-2020s, a team equipped with modern mixed gas systems, high lumen lighting, and advanced cutting tools decided to try again. What they found changed everything. The compartment was preserved, eerily so. Rubber seals had slowed the ocean's destruction. Objects lay exactly where sailors had left them in 1945. Personal lockers, foot chests, uniforms, but also items that should never have been on a combat patrol. A ceremonial dagger, a pristine naval dress uniform, and folded with deliberate care, a red armband bearing a swastika. This wasn't random memorabilia. This was symbolic, and symbols have meaning. Then came the documents, wrapped in oilcloth, protected from seawater, intentionally preserved. Inside were propaganda leaflets, printed in English, not for soldiers, for civilians. Messages designed to destabilize morale, to plant doubt, to fracture trust. Why would a submarine on a patrol mission carry psychological warfare materials? And then, the most alarming discovery, a partially encrypted codebook. Markings identified it as intelligence-related, not naval, not operational, intelligence. At that moment, the story crossed a line. Because intelligence materials are not sent on routine patrols. They are sent on missions where failure is not an option. Suddenly, U-869's presence near the American coast made sense, not as a hunter, but as a courier, or worse, a delivery system. If this submarine had survived just a little longer, if it had surfaced, if its mission had been completed, the final months of World War II on American soil might have looked very different. And perhaps that is why the truth stayed buried. Because the most dangerous missions are the ones no one is supposed to know ever existed. There is a name that should not exist in this story. A name that was never meant to survive beyond a typewritten roster. Herbert Guschowski. According to German naval records, Herbert was assigned to U-869 during its preparation phase. He trained with the crew, slept in the same barracks, learned the same emergency drills, ate at the same mess tables as the men who would later vanish into the Atlantic. And then, days before departure, fate intervened. Herbert fell ill. Nothing dramatic, no heroic injury, just enough to make him unfit for submarine duty. In the tight, pressurized environment of a U-boat, even a minor illness could be lethal, not just to the patient, but to the entire crew. So command made a routine decision. Herbert was removed. Another sailor took his place. U-869 sailed without him. For the next 50 years, Herbert believed he had lost every one of his crewmates near Gibraltar. He lived with survivor's guilt, a quiet, heavy kind that doesn't ask for attention. Then the phone rang. In the 1990s, civilian divers investigating the New Jersey wreck tracked him down. When they told him what they had found, Herbert didn't believe them. How could he? Everything he had been told for half a century said the submarine died thousands of miles away. So the divers showed him proof. Photographs of the wreck, images of German gauges, and finally, the knife, engraved with the name Hornberg. Herbert recognized it instantly, not as an artifact, as a memory. He confirmed the name, confirmed the man, confirmed that Georg Hornberg had trained with him aboard U-869. At that moment, the mystery crossed from history into something deeply personal. Because if the wreck off New Jersey was U-869, then Herbert had been living beside a lie for most of his life. And worse, the families of the dead had been grieving in the wrong place. When Herbert was asked about the mission, his answers were careful. Too careful. He spoke of routine orders, of discipline, of secrecy. But when pressed about intelligence operations, he fell silent. Those who interviewed him later described the same impression. Not ignorance, restraint, as if there were things he chose not to say. And that only deepened the unease, because silence is rarely empty. As more attention quietly turned toward U-869, one question dominated the investigation. If the submarine was carrying intelligence materials, then who was supposed to receive them? Germany did attempt covert operations on American soil during the war. Small teams, saboteurs, sleeper agents. Most were caught. Some disappeared into the noise of history. What if U-869 was part of that final gamble? A submarine slipping through collapsing defenses, approaching the coast under cover of winter storms, delivering something or someone, and vanishing before anyone noticed. That would explain everything. The rerouted course, the sealed torpedo tubes, the preserved propaganda, the intelligence codebook. It would also explain why the crew never reacted. Because if something went wrong inside the boat, there would have been no time. Investigators began examining damage patterns with this new lens. The forward compartments were catastrophically destroyed. Bulkheads folded inward. Pressure damage suggested an explosion where there should not have been one. Not a weapon, a payload. Some researchers proposed a chilling alternative theory. U-869 may have been carrying experimental materials, not necessarily weapons, but sensitive intelligence equipment, self-destruct charges, or classified cargo designed to eliminate itself if capture was imminent. Late-war German doctrine increasingly favored denial over survival. If the submarine was compromised, it may have been programmed to die. The idea is controversial. There is no surviving document that confirms it, but there is also no document that disproves it. And the ocean has a way of keeping secrets intact. What we do know is this: the crew never attempted escape. No one reached the hatches. No one sent a signal. The submarine didn't fight back. It vanished. And for nearly 50 years, it succeeded. If you're finding this investigation as disturbing as I am, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Stories like this exist on the edge of history, and they only survive if people choose to keep asking questions. Because what happens next is the part nobody wants to talk about. In the years following the wreck's identification, certain discoveries were never officially published. Items were cataloged privately. Conversations happened behind closed doors. Some divers were advised, quietly, to stop talking. No threats, no censorship, just pressure. Because once you accept that U-869 wasn't where it was supposed to be, you have to ask why the truth stayed hidden for so long, and whether it was ever meant to surface at all. By the time investigators reached the final phase of the U-869 case, one truth had become unavoidable. This was no longer just a lost submarine. It was a suppressed story. Every major mystery has a moment where all remaining explanations feel wrong, except one. And in the case of U-869, that moment arrived when researchers stopped asking how the submarine died and started asking who benefited from the silence. Because mistakes happen in war, but mistakes don't usually survive 50 years without being corrected. Let's look at what didn't happen. No German post-war investigation ever tried to locate U-869. No Allied survey ever searched the Gibraltar site for wreckage. No official correction was issued after the New Jersey discovery. Only quiet acknowledgments. It was as if everyone involved was content to let the original story remain intact, even when it was proven wrong. That behavior doesn't align with military pride or historical accuracy. It aligns with containment. As more technical dives were completed, analysts focused on one unsettling detail that had been overlooked for years. The explosion that destroyed U-869 did not propagate outward like a weapon strike. It collapsed the boat inward. The pressure signature was wrong. Depth charges explode outside the hull. Torpedoes detonate against it. Both leave identifiable damage patterns. But U-869 looked as if something inside had suddenly ceased to exist, as if the pressure differential became instantly unsurvivable. That suggests a rapid internal detonation, not an attack, and not an accident. Some submarines carried self-destruct mechanisms designed to prevent capture. Normally, these were last resort scuttling charges, manually activated by the crew. But the crew of U-869 never moved. They didn't run. They didn't react. They didn't even brace. Which means, whatever happened occurred without warning. That rules out manual detonation. So what remains? An automated failsafe, a device triggered by specific conditions, loss of communication, navigational deviation, proximity to enemy territory, or unauthorized access to secured compartments. This theory would explain everything: why intelligence materials were present, why they were carefully preserved, why they were never delivered, why the submarine died silently. U-869 may not have been sunk. It may have been terminated. And if that is true, then the crew were never meant to survive the mission. Not as punishment, as protocol. Late in the war, Germany faced a terrifying reality. Information was more dangerous than weapons. Codes, agents, and plans could not be allowed to fall into enemy hands. So certain missions were designed with no return. The submarine approaches. The delivery fails. The system activates. No witnesses. No evidence. No questions. Except, one thing went wrong. The ocean kept the evidence. And decades later, civilians found it. That's the part nobody anticipated. And once the wreck was identified, authorities had two options: rewrite history publicly, or quietly accept the correction without reopening old wounds. They chose silence, because acknowledging the truth would raise questions that extend far beyond one submarine. Questions about covert operations, about intelligence warfare, about how close the war may have come to American shores without anyone knowing, and questions about how many other stories like this remain buried. The final confirmation came not from documents, but from absence. No follow-up missions were launched. No rescue attempts were recorded. No recovery operations occurred. It was as if U-869 ceased to exist the moment it vanished, exactly as planned. Today, the wreck still lies off the coast of New Jersey. It is protected, monitored, and rarely discussed. A steel tomb in cold darkness. 56 men rest inside. Men who believed they were sailors. Men who may have unknowingly become part of something far larger. Men whose families were told a story that was easier to live with than the truth. If you've stayed with this story until now, I ask you, like the video and subscribe to the channel, not for the algorithm, but because history like this only survives when people refuse to accept the first explanation they're given. Because the most dangerous secrets aren't the ones that are classified. They're the ones everyone agrees not to talk about. And somewhere beneath the Atlantic, U-869 remains exactly where it was meant to be, hidden, silent, and waiting for the next question.